Did you find that to be the case where, yes, here's the United Nations General Secretary, alleged war criminal, I got all the proof, facts, and see, it didn't even run in 1991. There's the facts. Now, Wiesenthal, by the way, somewhat of a colluder in the sense of fact distortion.
He helped cover up Waldheim's Nazi past. Yeah. First, I think by accident, and then later, quite intentionally, as the revelations began. That was definitely a major sub-theme of the book. I wanted to document as many of these instances as possible, Wiesenthal's defenses of Waldheim, and I will immodestly say I think it's meticulously sourced, hundreds and hundreds of endnotes. No one has successfully challenged any of the facts that I set forth in the book, and there's actually hardly any challenges of the facts. It was clear that he was a great publicist, clear that he was a great advocate for justice, clear to me that but for the publicity that he brought to these cases, that efforts in Europe, especially in Germany, to pursue justice at least in some number of cases over the years, that effort would have fizzled out by the end of the 60s. So I admired him. I had been a contributor of his, but I did know that the stories of his investigative exploits and discoveries were largely bogus. What he also provided, though, was an address. People who had suspicions or actual knowledge of some Nazi criminal who didn't otherwise know whom to write to could just write Simon Wiesenthal, Vienna, and it would get to him, and he would know to refer it to the Germans. Wiesenthal used to like to tell the story that someone once wrote a letter, Simon Wiesenthal, wrote a letter that just said, "To the whore of Vienna." That's all it said on the envelope. And it went to him, and it really was it was obviously hate mail, but it was intended for him. And Wiesenthal, his only problem was, how did the postmaster know to send it to me? But I also knew that he had wrongly accused innocent people. There was a well-known case in Canada. So I think I had a properly nuanced view.
But a view which would be a minority view, I assume, within the Jewish community.
Certainly at that time it would have been, yeah. I mean, that would have come as a shock to most people.
Did you get pushback?
From?
Jewish community saying, oh,
I'll tell you, not so much from the Jewish community, because once we started exposing Waldheim and ended up kind of locked in battle with him, it really was almost bizarre. We would reveal some evidence, and the initial response would often come not from Waldheim, not from the People's Party, but from Simon Wiesenthal, who would say things like, well, that's old documentation, to which my boss, who was a media genius, Elon Steinberg, would tell the media, sure, it's old documents. It's 1943 or 1942. It's captured Nazi documentation. So as that happened, there were some figures in the Jewish community who finally came out and said, look, don't pay any attention. They said publicly, Wiesenthal doesn't know what he's doing. He's messed up so many cases, and here's an example, here's an example. The former Israeli ambassador to Paraguay, Benno Weiser-Varon, if I'm remembering the name correctly, spoke out courageously. There were some others. The real problem was in what one might call the secular world, and that remains so. The Jews were prepared to believe that maybe Wiesenthal wasn't what he said he was. But in the secular world, there was, I guess, a great fear of saying that. We actually had, I think it was Lars Erik Nelson in the New York Daily News, write a piece that said, if Wiesenthal says Waldheim is okay, then he's okay. What's wrong with you people at the World Jewish Congress? And there was a cover story, I think, in the same issue of the Daily News, a giant front page headline that says, hands off Waldheim, says Nazi hunter. It's like awful stuff. That's the pushback that we got.
I think I find that interesting that he sort of became the advocate for Waldheim.
Actually, as I was writing the book, I figured out, looking at documents, getting additional documents, that there was another reason that Wiesenthal had opposed us that I could not have imagined. As the investigation progressed, we learned that someone had checked with an archive in Berlin in the 1970s and had gotten some documents on Waldheim that, if you read them carefully, should have told whoever got this document that Waldheim was lying. When he had said publicly over and over again that he was injured in the war early on in the Soviet Union and was out of it after that, recuperated and went to law school in Vienna and basically was in law school at all the significant times, that was a lie. That you could tell from this wartime German document that it was a lie. Well, let me not, it's been a quarter of a century, let me not say wartime German document. It may have been a compilation of information from wartime German documents. I no longer have that in memory, but information from World War II. And we always wondered, well, who had gotten this? What we did learn is that when the Israelis were alarmed by Waldheim's seeming animus towards Israel when he was Secretary General in the 70s, doing things like allowing Yasser Arafat of the PLO to not only to address the UN General Assembly, but to be wearing a gun holster as he did so, which to most eyes looked like he actually had a gun, going to the Israel Holocaust Memorial, Yad Vashem, and being the only head of state in history to refuse to put on a kippah, yarmulke. They were very concerned. And their ambassador at the UN finally said publicly, look, we have a lot of disagreements with the Secretary General, but this isn't one of them. We never said that he did anything improper during World War II. And I also wondered, well, why would the Israelis say that? Well, as I was working on the book, I learned what happened. It was Wiesenthal who got that information from Berlin. He misread it. And why was he getting it? The Israelis, thinking the way most people did, that Wiesenthal knew how to investigate these cases, sorry, error, had turned to him to check out Waldheim. He got that document, misread it, told the Israelis that Waldheim was okay, and as a result, the truth didn't come out for decades. The result was that Wiesenthal, locking horns with us, wasn't just defending Waldheim, he was defending himself, his own reputation, because if we actually proved, as we finally did in the Justice Department, where I'm recused from the Waldheim affair, confirmed it, if we proved that Waldheim was involved in Nazi crimes, then Wiesenthal's misreading of the file wasn't just harmless error, it had prevented the truth from coming out at a time that it could have made a difference when he was at the UN. We also even found that Waldheim had been listed as a wanted war criminal after the war by the United Nations War Crimes Commission itself. Pushback always was from the so-called secular world, not from the Jewish world. The same thing happened when my book was finally published, because I decided the public is not going to believe that the infallible Nazi hunter made a mistake just in this one case. So I had to write quite a bit what I knew about his false claim to credit in the Eichmann case, his telling the Israelis who were already on the verge of grabbing Eichmann in 1960 in Argentina that, oh, I found him, I think he's in northern Germany, his buffoonery in the Mengele case and so many others, false accusations, so that readers would realize it wasn't just this one case, this is part of a pattern. When the book came out, I got uniformly fabulous reviews in Jewish newspapers around the world, in Israeli newspapers.
Never met Simon Wiesenthal?
No, sir.
And today, if I pretend I'm Simon Wiesenthal and you being the good prosecutor, and you had an opportunity to ask one question, what would you ask?
Wow. To ask him one question, I would say, why did you betray the survivors, the victims, by siding with Kurt Waldheim as the disclosures were being made first by our organization? Why did you turn down my boss's offer at the time to see the documents? Because he said to you, you keep telling the media, there's no evidence, and yet I know I was there in the room when he was on the phone with you and heard him offer you those documents and you refused. Why? I mean, I think I know why, I think I've explained why, but I still would like to hear him answer the question.